This is my presentation on historical negationism by me, Jessa Beslobetsky. Here are a few things I'm going to talk about today, including the question, what is historical negationism, how it affects us today, the psychology of forgetting, negationism in the United States, social media and negationism, long-term effects of negationism, and the solutions and conclusions for solving negationism. Looking back at history can cause many emotions: sadness, happiness, disappointment, discomfort, anger, and all of these are common responses to learning history. These feelings are necessary and valid, but what if we altered history so that we didn't have to feel negative feelings anymore? This is the question that many countries are asking themselves today. And they're deciding what to teach in schools, what they put in textbooks, and even museums. Historical negationism is the distortion or denial of established historical events, especially well-documented events. This can contribute to social injustices by erasing experiences of marginalized groups and denying injustices that certain communities have faced. There is a psychological underlayer to why we tend to forget the past. Hannah Arendt, a German philosopher and political theorist, wrote a book called The Origins of Totalitarianism. She talked about the dangers of denial of historical events and how propaganda played into manipulation of people in historic events at her time. Arendt pointed out that totalitarian regimes are only able to prevail if the masses are able to accept a grand narrative transcending a face value understanding of reality. This distorts historical reality and undermines the collective memory. She talks about the banality of evil, which shows how average people like you and I may become complicit when it comes to negationism. She believes that it is our job to preserve our collective memory, and this aids to the concept of social amnesia, or the idea of group forgetting, as titled by Russell Jacoby. This occurs on a group or individual basis, and social amnesia is sometimes linked to the repression of events due to trauma. And on a societal scale, this means that people may ignore parts of history, or intentionally or unintentionally, especially relating to shame and guilt. There should be a sense of accountability and more education about this, even though social amnesia is prevalent. In the United States, a topic such as slavery is watered down in classrooms and textbooks, as well as on a societal scale. Schools are not teaching the history of American slavery, and textbooks have little detail about it, resulting in students failing to know about significant roles slavery played. And as you can see, this is a graph of all of the textbooks conducted by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and the best textbook achieved a score of 70% against their rubric of what should be included in the study of American slavery, and the average was 46%. In addition, bills are constantly being introduced that inhibit educators from discussing critical race theory and the extent of racism in the United States. One of the bills, called House Bill 2988, the first one that I have listed in Oklahoma, says that it will withhold government funding for schools who are found to teach anything that says America has a serious problem of racism, as well as the notion that people of color are inherently oppressed. The fear is that children will learn to hate their own country, which is not accurate. A government should own up to their past wrongs rather than covering it up, which leads to a lack of trust from its citizens. Since January 2021, 35 states have introduced 137 bills limiting to what schools can teach with regard to race, American history, politics, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Citizens should be worried about the censorship of topics, which can quickly fall into negationism. Social media aids in the spread of negationism. Kanye West is a popular celebrity who has towed the line into Holocaust denialism. In a podcast, West said every human being has value that they brought to the table, especially Hitler. And many people listen to his music, as well as many young people. The things he says have had consequences, leading to more anti Semitic behavior from politicians and other celebrities. And in 2021, the United Nations did a research study on Holocaust denialism on social media. They found that almost half of all Holocaust related content on Telegram, for example, is false, misleading, or distorted. This newer social media platform does not have moderation on policies or policies on denialism. This doesn't just go towards unmoderated platforms. The same research found that on Twitter, nearly 1 in 5 posts either denies or distorts the history of the Holocaust. Social media platforms have the responsibility to act against negationism and denialism. Many platforms, as you can see, have started to include fact check labels. And this has really helped, especially on platforms such as YouTube and TikTok. And as you can see in this graph, once YouTube started adding these labels and moderating more of denialism, the rates of the Holo hoax or just Holocaust related denial significantly decreased. And it is the responsibility of other social media platforms to follow suit. Negationism damages communities. In 1819, Congress passed the Civilization Fund Act, which started federally funded Native American boarding schools. Government and police officials forced kids to go to these schools. It was mandatory. These kids were given new American names, cut off their hair, changed the way they dressed, and wiped away their culture. They were not allowed to speak anything but English, no matter if they knew it or not. If they didn't follow the rules, they would get major consequences. Things like restrictions, confinement, physical, sexual, and psychological abuse were all prevalent in these schools. Their history has been wiped out and subsequently forgotten. And this has led Native Americans to be incarcerated at higher rates, suffer from addiction, experience mental health issues, have medical conditions, be low income or affected by poverty, and they are still being murdered today. In order to remember, we must enforce memory laws. There's a few countries who have decided to criminalize Holocaust negationism, such as Germany, who has a Holocaust denial law, which consequences could be up to 5 years in prison or extreme fines. France was one of the first countries to enact memory laws, and their act is called the Gestatt Act. And also, the United Nations has issued a policy for countries to apologize for their wrongs. And Nazi symbolism, such as swastikas, have been banned from all of these countries. This is a huge amount of progress made for the remembrance of historical events. This would only help schools, social media, and different people who are affected by negationism. It is hard to see such significant parts of history denied by the public. Memory laws should be implemented in all countries to stop negationism. In conclusion, historical negationism does damage to many communities and prevents education and necessary conversation about accountability. There are underlying factors for why we forget, such as social amnesia, but this is not an excuse. Many cultures rely on their history to form relationships and connect to society. And memory laws have established a no-tolerance policy, which would be helpful for every nation. And memory laws should be implemented everywhere. We fear of admitting the past because that would make us accountable for our past generations, although atrocities will never stop if we don't talk about them. We as a society cannot alter the feelings we have about the past, or else it will and has caused irrevocable damage to the communities who are most vulnerable. It is our job and responsibility to remember.